Assalamualaikum. Good day and welcome back to the virtual colloquium 2021 organized by Institute of Teacher Education International Languages Campus, or better known as IPGKBA, Institute Pendidikan Guru Kampus Bahasa Antarabangsa, with the theme Humanizing Teaching and Learning, the Dynamics of Language Education in the Waves of Global Change. I am Nur Mazni Abdul Karim, a lecturer here in IPGKBA, and I will be the moderator for today's session. Before we proceed with today's session, I will briefly present to you a little housekeeping matters. First, please register yourself in the link provided. An e-certificate will be given out to you based on the email address that you provide. Please ensure that you key in your email address correctly. Secondly, the speaker will present his talk for about 40 minutes. This will be followed by a question and answer session from the audience. If you have questions for our speaker, please feel free to post your questions in the chat box. The speaker will answer the questions at the end of the session. Lastly, we would like to encourage you to share today's webinar with your social network. Thank you. Now, allow me to introduce you to our presenter for today, Encik Jasli bin Jamil. Encik Jasli is an English language teacher and currently holding a position as senior assistant in co-curriculum and at Sekolah Kebangsaan Segamat Kecil. He received his bachelor's degree from International Languages Teacher Education Institute, IPGKBA. I'm sure all his lecturers here are very proud of him. All right, to date, he has obtained Anugerah Guru Cemerlang Peribumi by Ministry of Education Malaysia, Gold Medal in Festival Pelangi Budaya Antarabangsa Budaya Nusantara Indonesia. He had also represented Malaysia in organisation of a pedagogy course at University of Nottingham, Malaysia campus. He is also selected as one of the master trainers for Initiative 57 Transformasi Pendidikan Orang Asli dan Peribumi of Ministry Education of Malaysia, Ministry of Education Malaysia. Encik Jasli Jamil is involved in publishing a guidebook for special intervention program for Orang Asli and Penan. It's called PIKAP, P-I-K-A-P, and is currently writing a guidebook for cultural element of Orang Asli with Curriculum Planning and Development Division, Ministry of Education Malaysia. His research interests are in the areas of Indigenous education, curriculum planning and development, learning strategies, and TESOL methodology. He is also interested in innovation and he has already involved in 5 innovation competitions and won multiple awards and bridging his school to international collaboration with other schools and institutions globally. All right, without further ado, please welcome Encik Jasli Jamil, who will be presenting on embedding culture in language teaching. I present to you.
Thank you, Dr. Mazni Abdul Karim, Head of English Department, and the moderator for today's session. First of all, I would like to thank IPGKBA, my alma mater, for this opportunity for me to share my best practices at school. And I would like to also welcome all the eminent speakers and guests from different walks of life to share their knowledge and vast experience in education field during the previous session in IPGKBA Virtual Colloquium 2021. And I would also like to thank all the officers from Ministry of Education, JPN Johor, and also officers from PPD Segamat. And also I would like to thank all of the teachers from around Malaysia and around the world who are here today, and especially my teachers in SK Segamat SK Segamat Kecil in Segamat. Thank you so much for being here. And it's really an honor to present um, to this session with you. And during this most challenging time in modern education history, whereby we always conducted our session through Google Meet, through online streaming. So I am very glad to present in this colloquium. Okay, without further ado, I would like to give you the overview of my presentation today. So these are the things that I'm going to talk. Okay, so for this presentation today, I will go deeper than just sharing my best practices in school, because for me, when we want to embed culture in language teaching, I think it involves a whole big process whereby first we need to observe the behaviors of our students. Okay, and then it involves another process of understanding the behaviors of the students, and last but not least, it involves a process whereby we should accept the differences of our students. So this is the whole process before we want to embed culture in language teaching. So for today's presentation, it will be supported with data through survey that I conducted with the Orang Asli community. So I have around 100 respondents from the Orang Asli, and also teachers who are teaching in Orang Asli schools. So this is the overview of the culture and language teaching, whereby I will introduce you how much culture engaging people through different education policies developed by the government. And then I will also share my best practices in school in the third part of this presentation, embedding culture in learning. And also for the last part of this presentation, I will share you about how I use English as a bridge to promote culture, promote the Orang Asli culture or Indigenous people culture, and how I use English as a platform for my students to connect with people around the world. So without further ado, I would like to go to the first slide of this presentation. So here we are going to talk about the struggles, the mindsets and the perception of the Orang Asli towards educations. So when we talk about the struggle, we are going to talk about the obstacle faced by the Orang Asli. So we are going to look at the background of the Orang Asli, their social cultural background, and we are also going to look at the mindset. What is their target when they come to school? So do they have the mindset that modern education is a threat to their culture and ways of life? So we are going to look at that. And then the third one, we are going to look at the perception of this Orang Asli. So do they think that informal education at home is more important than the formal education in school? So we are going to look at that. And for the first obstacles or struggle that faced by the Orang Asli is poverty. So as we know, a study shows that poverty rate of the Orang Asli was at 49% in 2009. So this means that almost half of the Orang Asli are considered as poor, while the national poverty rate was only at 3.8%. So this means that Orang Asli is 12 times poorer than any other race in Malaysia. So this is a big issue, and this is a big obstacle faced by the Orang Asli to get equal access to education. And by saying that, most of Orang Asli, they do not have permanent jobs, and they were classified as hardcore poor. When they are classified as hardcore poor, this means that their monthly income in Malaysia for the hardcore poor is below 500 ringgit. And when they are poor, this student, this Orang Asli student or Indigenous students, they have limited to learning resources at home. So for example, my students, they do not have enough or ample learning resources at home. For example, they do not have things as simple as newspaper as one of the resources for learning materials at home, and also they do not have any extra exercise books. Most of my students, they do not have reference books at home, and they do not attend extra classes like tuition, for example. So according to the survey that I conducted with the Orang Asli communities and also teachers from Orang Asli school, so I asked them whether they think that poverty affects the Orang Asli education, and around 80.6% of these Orang Asli, my respondents, they think that poverty does affect the Orang Asli education. So here we can see that the teachers and also the Orang Asli, they have realized that poverty is actually will affect their children at school. And according to Saliza Koya, one of the teachers in Negeri Sembilan, and she is an Orang Asli teacher and teaching in Orang Asli school. According to her, okay, she is also a Negeri Sembilan innovative teacher for 2018. According to her, poverty exists and it limits the pupils. Nevertheless, it should not be regarded as hindering factor to success, because every child has the same opportunity, and being poor does not mean you will fail in life. So what we can see here, according to Cikgu Saliza Koya, she thinks that yes, poverty exists and it will limit the pupils, the Orang Asli pupils. Nevertheless, this should not be one of the hindering factors for the Orang Asli to success in life. Okay, we are going to move to the next slide. And another obstacle faced by the Orang Asli is parents' educational level and awareness of the importance of education. So, according to the study conducted in 2008, Orang Asli literacy rate was only at 51%. So it means that another 49% of Orang Asli are actually illiterate. And most of them are actually adults or parents at home. So by saying that, um, when the Orang Asli is illiterate, actually being illiterate results to weak support system at home, because their parents, the Orang Asli parents, they can't really help the students with homework or schoolwork at home. And in a study, for example, in a study of a Semai community in Perak, Orang Asli parents are lack of basic literacy and numeracy skill to help their children in their schoolwork. So for me personally, being illiterate actually does not mean that they are unsupportive, but it will eventually affect the parents' ability to support the Orang Asli children to learn better at home. And according to the survey I conducted, I asked the Orang Asli and Orang Asli teachers whether they think that parents' education level will affect the students' success rate. And yes, 70% of the Orang Asli, the respondents, the Orang Asli and Orang Asli teachers, think that education level does affect the students' success rate at school. So as we can see here, most of the Orang Asli actually they have realized that parents' education level is very important in order to make sure that mulberry areas faced by so children as young as 7 years old, they had to leave parents and stay in hostel. So they have to live separately from their parents, because if they want to go to school, they have to go to the hostel and stay in the hostel. Some of the Orang Asli students, yeah. So living separately will affect the Orang Asli, the indigenous students' emotion, and when they stay in the hostel separately with their parents, actually they face a lack of family bonding. And when the family bonding decreases, this is when their motivation also decrease. So this will lead to a few problems. For example, disciplinary problems, or students at the hostel, they feel homesick and they miss their family. So this will result to a dropout, the high dropout rate of Orang Asli students at hostels. And the next obstacle faced by the Orang Asli is lack of infrastructures and utilities. So students, Orang Asli students in Orang Asli village, they face this infrastructure and utilities problem whereby they have lack of proper roads to go to school. And sometimes they have limited to basic amenities such as electricity, water, sanitation, and telecommunication infrastructure. So as we know, okay, for example, if we have the students in the city, even the student in big city, they need a proper infrastructure and their basic needs, for example electricity and water, needs to be fulfilled. So this is one of the big issue for the Orang Asli, and mostly happen in Orang Asli village whereby they have limited access to basic amenities. So this will affect the students in school. So, according to a survey that I conducted, I asked them whether they think scattered Orang Asli settlements limit their access to school, and yes, 70.8% of my respondents agree that scattered Orang Asli settlements limit the access for the Orang Asli students to go to school. And according to Arshad Katan, one of the teachers in Orang Asli school, there is another problem that he faced in school. So the problem is parents are willing to send their children to stay at hostels, but Orang Asli children prefer to stay with their parents since their family can afford to provide what they need at home. Moreover, transport is provided by Jakwa to bring them to schools. So this is one of the issues that faced by Cikgu Arshad Katan, Orang Asli teacher in SMK Beko, whereby most of the students nowadays, most of the parents nowadays, they are willing to send their children to stay at hostels. But the Orang Asli students, they prefer to stay at home because their parents can provide better at home. And this results to certain problems such as their attendance rate is decreased because when they stay at home, um, they seems reluctant to go to school because they are quite comfortable there. And when they go to the hostels, it is better because teachers can monitor the Orang Asli students. So if they don't go to school, teachers can call them from the hostels. So these are the problems that the Orang Asli face um, with geographical barriers. Okay, so I'm going to look at the next slide, and this is another struggles or obstacle faced by the Orang Asli, language and cultural barriers. Okay, this is one of the most important since our topic for today is embedding culture. So as we know that Orang Asli has a very strong cultural background. So one of the problem faced by the Orang Asli is diversity of languages, whereby they have a lot of languages. We have 18 tribes, and for example, I am from Temuan tribes, and there are another 17 tribes around Malaysia. So we have a lot of languages spoken by the Orang Asli. So the first one, diversity of language. So this results to language barriers as most of them speak mother tongue. So as we can see in Orang Asli schools, in Orang Asli classroom or Indigenous classroom, most of the students, they prefer to speak with their mother tongue. So for example, in my school, SK Segamat Kecil, people will mostly talk in Bahasa Jakun, Jakun language, one of the languages for the Orang Asli. And then Orang Asli students have trouble understanding lessons and instruction from their teachers, according to Wahab and Mustafa in a study in 2015. Okay, so as we can see here, according to the study, they think that the Orang Asli students, they have difficulty and they have trouble understanding lesson instruction from their teachers because their teachers speak Bahasa Melayu and English, while the students prefer to speak in their mother tongue. Um, but there's one finding that is interesting here. When I asked my respondents whether they think the use of English or Bahasa Melayu in school will affect the students' understanding in the teaching and learning process, 69.2% of my respondents think that using Bahasa Melayu or English in school does not affect students' understanding in the teaching and learning process. Nevertheless, we should bear in mind that most of my respondents are actually from Facebook. So they are quite exposed with Bahasa Melayu. So I don't think that they actually realize that most of the students in Orang Asli school are actually having trouble they education at home, whereby they learn from their environment through songs, through arts, crafts, legend, and folk tales told by their parents and grandparents. So when they come to school, it is a transition from oral culture to literate culture when orang Asli children enter primary school. So this is a big transition, a big jump for the orang Asli, whereby at home they learn through listenings, and when they go to school they have to learn through textbook, for example. So it is a transition from oral culture to literate culture. So this will give a big problem for the orang asli. And according to one Afizi, in a study in 2014, strong cultural and environment factors are among the dropout factors of orang asli students. So this is really a big problem that the teacher need to know before they want to embed culture in learning or they want to teach in orang asli school. These are the problems that they need to understand. They need to understand the background of the students before they enter or teach in orang asli school, indigenous school in Malaysia. Okay, so we are going to look at emerging culture and engaging peoples through education policies. So I have a question here. Which one is important? Whether do you think that culture is more important than education or otherwise? So this question actually I asked to a lot of teachers and orang asli communities, and for me personally, culture and education are actually two inseparable parameters, and they are actually interdependent to each other. You need to say that culture is important as equally as education, and any educational patterns get its guidance from the cultural pattern of society. So that's why in Malaysia, for example, we have civic education because previously, maybe 10 or maybe 20 to 30 years before this, our education, informally, we learn at home through civic education, through some of the norms and values that we learn from our community. So that's why we have civic education in Malaysia. So actually, educational pattern gets its guidance from the cultural pattern of a society. So here, I want all of the teachers who are going to teach or who are teaching in Orang Asli School, they need to introduce education as something equally important as culture of Orang Asli. So what teachers need to do is teachers need to introduce education as a new culture for the Orang Asli, and they need to make sure that their student knows that education is one of the way um, to succeed in life, and we need to make sure that they feel that education is a trend to success. If you want to succeed in life, we need to have proper education. And then teachers, they need to make their student understand that education is one of the key for the students to preserve their culture and to promote their culture to other people. And teachers also need to make the students understand that they can learn about new cultures through education. And our role as a teacher in Orang Asli School is we need to make sure that our student knows that education is actually equally as important as culture. because we know that our orang asli students, they are very, culturally inclined. So we need to make sure that when they go to school, they know that education and culture is equally important and interdependent. Okay, so I am going to show you some of the education policies for orang asli in Malaysia. So these are the government efforts to make sure that the orang asli have equal access to education. Okay, the first initiative taken by the government is by building a comprehensive special school program, or K9 schools. This school actually is to overcome the problem of dropout among the orang asli peoples, especially when it involves the transition from year 6 to year 1. So this K9 school actually built to motivate the orang asli students to finish their school, especially those students who are in a transition from year 6 to form 1. So this school actually compromises of students from year 1 to form 3. So K9 school is one of the initiatives taken by the government to make sure that the students have a smooth transition from year 6 to year 1, as well as to motivate the students to finish their school until they finish their SPM. And then another initiative taken by the government is Orang Asli and Indigenous Adult Classes, or KEDAP. This KEDAP class focuses on the efforts to eradicate the rate of illiteracy among Orang Asli students through their parents. So the purpose of this KEDAP is actually to produce quality parents at home, so that they can be a good support system for their children. And when they become a strong support system for their children, they can actually teach, and they can teach their children at home, and help them with, for example, homework. Okay. Then KEDAP is okay. So another initiative by the government is through pickup. So pickup is aimed to overcoming the dropout among orang asli pupils by practicing the concept of learning is fun through three important skills, which are reading, writing, and counting. And I was one of the panelists for the pickup, and I'm very lucky to be one of the panelists, because through pickup, I realized that pickup actually give the opportunity for the students, or orang asli students, to make sure that they have equal access to education. And there are 8 elements of indigenous pedagogy in pickup, and this pickup actually to make sure that the students will have fun learning at schools. And orang asli is very lucky because pickup is developed to make sure that the orang asli students at school, they can relate their culture while learning. They can relate their culture while learning. Okay, so we are going to look at the 8 elements of indigenous pedagogy after this. But before that, I will introduce you to another initiative by the government, which is Ruby. So Ruby is a translation tool that provides translation for Tamil language to help teachers with teaching and learning, to help teachers to translate their teaching and learning materials and developing their material for the students. So Ruby is actually a translation tools that translate teaching materials, and it is used by the teachers who are teaching the Tamil people in Kelantan and also Perak. So this tool is very important because teachers are using them as one of the important tools to translate the teaching materials to Tamil language. Okay, next we have Sisipan, or Sisipan Khas, or special insert. This is actually a module developed by Curriculum Development Division to introduce indigenous indigenous cultural elements in art and physical education subjects in school. So this CC Panhas is actually in progress. We are currently developing these materials for the Orang Asli teachers. And most of the panelists for CC Panhas is actually Orang Asli teachers in Orang Asli schools. So this special inserts is to make sure that our students will have enough materials, and we are also actually using our um, our own language in the CC Panhas. So this special insert will be distributed to Orang Asli School next year. Okay, so these are all the initiatives taken by the government of Malaysia to make sure all the Orang Asli in Malaysia have equal access to proper education. So next we are going to look at how to embed culture in learning. But before that, I am going to show you some of the guidelines for teachers who are teaching in the Orang Asli. And this guidelines is actually shared by the teachers who are teaching in the indigenous classroom. So as we know, teachers in Malaysia, they have their very own um, uh, routine in the classroom, for example, and they have their own classroom rules. And same goes to the to teachers who are teaching in Orang Asli schools. But for the Orang Asli, there are some special elements that we need to implement in our classroom. So before we enter the classroom, these are the things that we need to know. So the first element that we can use in the indigenous classroom is implement an element of love and praise. So, as I mentioned to you just now, some of the Orang Asli children, they already live separately from their parents at the age of 7 because they need to stay at a hostel. So, it is really important for teachers who are teaching in Orang Asli school or indigenous school to make sure that they implement an element of love and praise. Maybe we can show them some of affection from the teachers. As teachers, we need to be less firm with our students so that they feel comfortable in the classroom. And then we can provide rewards. Second one, we can provide rewards for our students. So according to BF Skinner theory, students who are provided with rewards in the classroom are more motivated to learn. So if we want our students to be motivated to learn in the classroom, we can provide rewards for them. And then another indigenous classroom rules that we can implement is we need to do more interactive or creative movement. So, for example, singing and dancing, whereby we introduce or include edutainment elements in our classrooms. And then we can increase the examples that were closely related to their daily life. So, for example, if we are teaching about family tree, for example, we can use examples that is closely related to them. For example, we ask them about their parents, we ask them about their community, for example, their cousin, their brothers and sisters. So we use this kind of example which are closely related to their daily life. And then in indigenous classroom, we can sometimes repeat the same teaching and learning for better understanding. So most of the students in Orang Asli schools, they need to be introduced to the same topic for 2 or 3 times. This happened to me whereby when I teach, I realized that some of my students, some of my weekend students, repeat and then we need to take account the prior knowledge of the students and their family background. So these are the elements that I told you just now. We need to know what are the problems that they face, what are their prior knowledge that they have before we teach the Orang Asli students. And then we can alternate the learning process with the games. For example, we use game in the classroom because the students seems to enjoy classroom with interactive games, for example. And then in Orang Asli indigenous classroom, we always need to emphasize on 3M activities, which is reading, writing, and counting. This is because it's really important for them to have a basic foundation, a strong foundation with the 3M activities. For example, we can use more activities that is using the reading and writing skills that can enhance their skills. So we can use these activities in the classroom. And then in the Indigenous classroom, we need to link the teaching and learning on the environment by using the existing materials in their environment. For example, if you want to teach about colors, for example, if you want to teach about colors, so we can use maybe flowers, or we can use any other object that they can find in their environment or they can find at home. So we use this as one of our teaching resource to teach them, and at the same time, these students can link to the nature. Okay, so these are the some elements that you need to implement in the Indigenous classroom before you teach the Orang Asli students. So these are the 8 elements of Indigenous pedagogy. So the first element is reconstruction, modification, connection to nature, connection to community, learning maps, indirect learning, symbols and images, hands-on, and storytelling. So we are going to look at the modification, how to modify our lesson plan. So in order for you to teach in Orang Asli schools, we need to include the 8 elements of Orang Asli pedagogy. So Orang Asli teachers need to modify their lesson plan that can meet the students' need. Okay, so for example, we include the 8 elements of education or Indigenous education pedagogy in our class, and we put it in our lesson plan. And then the second element is connection to nature. So these are the activities that I did with my students outside of the classroom. We have our English camp, and sometimes I brought the students to the nearest river in the village, and I taught them um, English in the near the riverbank. So, for example, this is one of the activity that I conducted with my students for the study week for UPSR in 2019. So we have this special program called Rela Minda, whereby a week before the UPSR, we will bring our students and we will conduct our lessons in the jungle. So as results, our passing rate for UPSR, especially for English, has increased to 70% from 40% in the previous year. And then connection to the community. So before COVID, we use our support group in school, whereby our parents, they will join the teachers to make sure we can manage the school better. For example, if students they absent, the parents will go to their house and try to find out why they do not come to schools. So these are the parent support group, as you can see in the picture. And then during the pandemic, I also try to make sure that I want to connect my lesson to the community. So I asked some of the parents to be the teacher at home. Okay, so these are the picture that they shared. These are the Kedap students, the ex Kedap students of SK Segamat Kecil, whereby these parents they have already mastered the 3M skills, and at home they can teach their children to complete their homework. Okay, so another approach that we can use approach that we can use in embedding culture in teaching is indirect learning. So as we know, when we use indirect learning approach, we try to use different methods in teaching. For example, we use experiment and problem solving activity. So for me, this is I look it as one process, whereby when I taught this one topic, spending wisely, in year 4, I give the student an experiment. I tried an experiment with my students. I give them one bottle of water for the students, and I told them to use the water wisely. So some of them already finished their water before they go back home, and some of them they brought the water to the school the next day, and they still have the water. So I want to make sure that they know actually we are facing the water waste problem. So I asked them to come up with with a solution for this problem. So they already innovate, they already produce a water dispenser, and they already presented this product to Prism 2019, a national level innovation competition, and they won silver and bronze medal for this innovation. Okay, next. Symbols and images. Came up with uh, in the picture. Um, this game actually drills the students by using symbols and images so they can understand better in the classroom. So next is hands-on activities. So these hands-on activities, I think now it is a perfect time for us to include hands-on activities, because most of our students, they are actually learning from home. So I think it is really important activity, because when we want to do hands-on activity, we will involve us some skills that we need to use. Okay, so at home they have their parents as a guide to them. So this is during the topic lunchtime for year one, and I ask my students to cook lunch for their parents and ask them to um, share the ingredients and steps that they use in order to cook lunch for their parents at home, and they are using English in these hands-on activities. Okay, next, using learning maps. So according to Zamri 2014, teaching and learning session will not succeed excellently if the teaching and learning still using the traditional methods. So we try to make sure we try to make sure our students learn better through learning maps, for example, graphic organizer or mind maps. And we can also use the I think maps with our students. So I came up with my own map for the students to answers question for UPSR paper one, the subjective questions. So I came up with a radio map whereby the students will list a few possible answers for the questions asked in UPSR, so that they can have a few choices and they can choose the best answers, and this will result that they will answer all the question, most of the question correctly. And this is really helpful for my students. This iReader map is very helpful, and they can answer most of the subjective questions correctly by using this map. And then storytelling. This is the last element in indigenous pedagogy. So storytelling is very important, because we know that previously, or actually they have informal education, right? So through informal education, they learn through listening. So they listen to they listen to songs, and they sing with their parents at home, and they also listen to a story of folk tales told by their parents at home. So at school, we can use this as one of our method in teaching English language. So in order to make it more interesting, I already add more engaging activities for the students. For example, I use stories that related to the Orang Asli or indigenous community in my school. Okay, for example, I use this Orang Asli folklore because when I taught them about Malaysian legend topic in year five, I realized that some of my students, they actually sometimes get bored because they can't relate to the story. So I use the story that is told by their parents at home, which is about as you can see here, it is about the tapi. So most of my students, they already heard the stories, but I want to introduce that story at school because I want it to be more interesting and more formal. So they learn through informal education at home about this story, and I brought it into the classroom and I add more challenging and engaging activities for them. And in order to make storytelling interesting, we need to make the storytelling session more interactive. This is the example of the storytelling session that I did with students in RPS Koma, one of the K9 schools in Malaysia. I did an activity, I did the storytelling activity with these students. And in order to make it more interesting, I added a song, a ritual, and also I asked the students to be one of the characters, whereby they can act as one of the characters in the story. So it really helps to engage the people throughout this learning session, the storytelling session. Next, this is the last part of my presentation. So this is how I use English as a bridge to promote culture, and I use English as a platform to connect with other people around the world. So what I did was I tried to find around 30 pen pals from other countries, and we already finished this program for the first phase, and I get my students to have pen pals from Gelepu Lower Secondary School in Bhutan. So um, I use letters for my students. They write letters for the Gelepu Lower Secondary School students, and we already sent around 30 letters to these schools, and we already received a very good feedback from the teachers and also from the students from Gelepu Lower Secondary Schools. So this is how I want my students to promote their culture, because in the letter itself, I asked them to write about their culture, their daily routine at home. So this is indirectly or accidentally can promote the Orang Asli culture to um, other other people around the world. Okay, another best practice in my school is an activity that I did with my Kedap students. So Kedap students are actually parents who come to school to learn the 3M, or the three basic skills, which is reading, writing, and counting. So one of the activity that I did with them is I asked them to come up with um, a postcard. So Vietnam, and Indonesia. So the first activity, and I asked them to come up with their own postcard, because previously they used picture like famous building in Malaysia or famous plant like Rafflesia in Malaysia, and they talk about the picture and in the postcard. But I also want my Kedap students and also my students to promote their culture to the whole world. So what I did was I did a photo shoot with them, and these are the pictures as you can see there, the four pictures about the Orang Asli traditional weave, Orang Asli traditional games, and also the Orang Asli traditional weapon, the blowpipe, and also the Orang Asli crafts. So these are some of the pictures that will be shared with other people around the world. And this is the next program that I will introduce to my Kedap students and as well as my students in the classroom. So if anyone wants to be the partner for this cross-culture program, they can call me, or they can contact me through WhatsApp so we can discuss about this. So I'm really glad that my students at school, they are willing to share about their culture. Okay, so this is my references, and that ends. I will end my session for now, and Dr. Mazni.
All right. Wow. Thank you, Cik Jasli. Thank you very much for the insightful presentation. Yeah, very informative indeed. especially with regards to language learning and teaching in the context of Orang Asli in Malaysia. And
Mm.
we really appreciate the beautiful photos that you have shared just now. Uh,
Yeah.
I will get that. I will get to the summary later on. Yeah, but before that, we have a few questions here, Cik Jasli. The first
Okay.
question is, what are the challenges, yeah, that you faced in embedding culture in language teaching and learning, ni? And what have you learned from them?
Okay. It's very good question. Okay. There are, of course, a few challenges that I face, especially when I first come to the school. So, when I first come to the school in SK Segamat Kecil, I don't really know about the background of my students. So, this is one of the big problems that I face. So, for me, it's really important. What I learned from that is it's really important for the teachers to know the background of the students, because it's really important, and it will help you to make sure you can come out with, sometimes intervention for the students. For example, if we know that some of our students, they are not good enough in 3M skills. So maybe we can come up with an innovation or intervention for the students. So this is one of the problem that I face, and I learned that teacher should have should know their students before they want to teach their students. And then another challenge will be uh, maybe this is personal, but for me, it's really hard for me to adjust with my students, because even though I am an Orang Asli teacher, their way of life for the Jakun people in my school is quite different from my ways of life. So I really need to understand, and I really need to explore my students first before I start to teach them. And I think I took around 3 to 4 months to adjust and to understand my pupils. So this is one of the big challenges, because at first when I came to the school, I speak fully English, and then the problem is, I can say that 95% of my students, they don't understand English, because English is the third language. Because they speak their mother tongue, and then second language is Bahasa Melayu, and the third language is English. So it's really hard for them to understand English. So this is when I need to come up with intervention to make sure that I can teach my student better. So these are the challenges that I face, and something that I've learned from these challenges.
Yeah, yes, indeed. Definitely, every teacher in your position would face, lots of challenges, and we need to overcome that. Yeah, as teachers, and yes, the way that you have overcome the challenges that you face shows that you have the passion to teach, and you try to overcome the challenges by trying out a few ways so that you get hold of the students and making sure that they learn, they want to learn, they are motivated to learn. Yeah, all right,
Yes,
thank you,
it's
thank
really
you.
important to make
And
sure they motivated first before you want to teach them, because
yes,
this is one of the important element whereby if the students are willing to learn, they will learn better.
very true. Yeah, all right, there's one here from our audience, Encik Kamaruzaman Harun, just to get your comment on what he is saying here, yeah, his statement. The process of, to expedite the process of English learning for the Orang Asli, Encik Kamaruzaman thinks that there should be Orang Asli language classes for teachers too. Maybe he's looking in the perspective of English for specific purpose, the purpose of, to teach orang asli students. The teachers may need to have some kind of language background, the students' language background, perhaps. What do you think of that? Oh, I guess we are experiencing some technical glitches here. All right, be patient, yeah. All right. Did you get my question just now, Cik Jasli?
Yes, I get your question.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Encik Kamrul Zaman,
What
for the
what is
question.
your what do you think of that?
Okay, actually, when I first came to the school, my senior teacher told me that previously in Orang Asli school, when the teacher posted to Orang Asli schools, they will join a course whereby this teacher will learn about the Orang Asli culture, and this is especially for the Johor teacher, whereby in Johor, JPN Johor, Jabatan Pendidikan Negeri Johor, they provide a course especially for the teachers who wants to teach the Orang Asli school. So they will go to a course whereby they need to understand the language, they need to understand the cultural or social background of the students, so that the teacher will understand their students better. So in my opinion, it is really important for teachers to have language classes that is related to the community that they want to teach, because as I mentioned just now in one of my PowerPoints presentation, the use of Ruby tool, for example, is to translate the teaching materials for the teachers who are teaching in Orang Asli school. So when they come up with this tool, we actually can recognize there are some problems for the Orang Asli teachers to understand the language of the language or mother tongue of the children that they teach at school. So it's really important if they can get some information about the language first, if they can speak a simple mother tongue of the Orang Asli first before they go and teach the Orang Asli students at school. And I agree to that.
Yes, indeed, yeah. And yeah, the teachers should be thankful, yeah, for the JPN, Jabatan Pendidikan Negeri, has taken that initiative to actually expose these teachers who are, first started to teach these schools, Orang Asli schools, and they give that exposure so that they understand the students better, right? So
Yes.
that's very important in the process of teaching and learning, I guess. Yeah, thank you. Thanks to the officers, I'm sure, who have actually initiated that program. Yeah. Okay,
Mm.
thank you. Let's move on to one more here from our audience, Miss Alia. She's actually from SK Gembut Kota Tinggi. She has a
Okay.
question here. As for Termia people, there's a specific translation tool for them. As you mentioned just now, was that Ruby?
Mm.
Cik
Yes.
Jasli, Ruby, yeah?
Translate.
Translating teaching material that you mentioned just now. So,
Mhm.
how about the other tribes? Do they also have their own translation tools that they can, that which can assist them in teaching?
Okay. As we know that Termia is one of the largest group for the Orang Asli. Okay, so there are Semai, Termia, and Semlai. These three largest group for the Orang Asli tribe in Malaysia.
Okay.
So for Bahasa Semai, they already have their own curriculum. I'm sure one of the Semai teacher are here, Cikgu Asnawi from Perak. Actually, they have their special curriculum whereby Bahasa Semai is taught in school. So they have their complex curriculum. They have their own the SKP and that and all that. And for this is one of the initiative for the Termia people, the second largest group for the Orang Asli. And I am sure this is only the first step from Ministry of Education to make sure that the students can learn better at school. So I am very sure in the future they will also develop um, some of the translation tools for any for other tribes language or other mother tongue. And as I mentioned just now, the Sisipan Has is one of the programs whereby they use the Sisipan Has to translate teaching materials. They already translated the teaching materials for for teachers who are teaching in the Orang Asli schools. So they translated into a few languages which is, for example, for my language, we translated teaching materials to term one, and we also insert cultural elements in the Sisepan Khas, and we translated also to Bahasa Samalai, and also a few other languages that is spoken widely by the orang asli, their mother tongue.
Okay. Very great innovations, yeah, which would actually help, that would provide great help actually for all the teachers involved in Orang
Mm.
Asli. I'm sure at the end of the day, the ultimate aim is to make sure that these students learn and become
Yeah,
better in life, right? Especially
yes.
in making sure that they adapt to the culture. You know, some of them,
Mhm.
it's their choice not to adapt to the modern culture, right? So
Yes.
to bring them to come, look here, you need to adapt as well, but it will be difficult in a way. But of course, with the teachers' guidance and everything, that can come in, I'm sure. Yeah. All right. One more here. Uh,
Mhm.
I guess it's a question. Yeah, it's a question from Josephine Martida. She says, okay, first she is giving her greetings from SK Kuala Tawau, Sarawak. As you have shared, she said, dropouts are common and absentees are high amongst the Orang Asli pupils. How does your school curb this situation? Any specific programs, initiatives? When I look at this question, I remember going to this one Orang Asli school in SK Bukit Lanjan in Damansara. It's actually situated in
Mm.
Damansara, very near to IKEA. To really think about it, it's a very modern place. But the students there, the Orang Asli there, wouldn't want to go by all the modern things which are there. So, and another thing is, I found out from the teachers in the school, once they are scolded by the teachers, they just don't attend school. They do not want to attend school for the whole year sometimes. So, this question here, how does your school curb this situation? Any specific programs, initiatives, Cik Jasli?
Okay. Okay. Thank you for the question, Miss Josephine. Okay. Actually, our school have come up with a few intervention to that problem, and we came out with a few solutions. Okay. Most of the programs that we did is conducted by our ham. So one of the programs is Hero Kehadiran, whereby we we appreciate those students who come early to school, and we give them present. For example, if they can come to the school early, and for 5 days in a week. So if they can break the record for 5 days, they come early to school. We will give them some initiative. We will give them some incentive, and then we also did a few programs which involve the community. Thank to JP and Johor as well, because they conducted a program whereby we need to share our best practices to curb the issues of dropout and uh, low rates with the students. Okay, so in one of our best practice we did in the school, we asked the PIBK, our sport group, to make sure that the students who are absent, they have a valid and strong reason not to go to schools. If they reluctant to go to school, we will ask the community to help us to bring them to the school. And we also have a few activities such as guru penyayang, to make sure that the students feel welcome to the school. And then another initiative will be class with kehadiran terbaik with the higher attendance rate. So they will win a few presents. Huh? Okay. So these are the examples of the initiative to curb this issue in my school.
All right. Thank you, yeah, for your response for that particular question. Yeah, great indeed. And you also mentioned again the guru penyayang that you mentioned just now. That's
Mhm.
where the tender love and care come
Yes.
in. Yeah, tender love
It's
and
really
care.
important for us to show our affection to the
Yes.
students, you know.
Yeah, very true. All right, last one I would say here
Hmm?
from Nurul Atikah Ramli. How do
Oh,
you
yeah.
think we can prepare new teachers in terms of cultural and language immersion during this pandemic? I think this can be applicable to teachers teaching in rural Sabah and Sarawak too, in terms of how to prepare these new teachers in terms of cultural and language immersion during this pandemic. She's saying that I think this can be applicable to teachers teaching in rural Sabah and Sarawak too. I'm sure this would involve all the indigenous people over there. Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. Because indigenous
Okay.
people
Okay.
in Malaysia includes the people in Sabah and Sarawak too.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Atika, for the questions. How to prepare the new teachers? I think um, Ministry of Education through JPN, they will make sure that all the teachers who wants to teach in their respective stage will have a proper, introduction to their community that they want to teach. Okay, as I mentioned just now, JPN Johor already conducted a program for the new teachers in orang asli schools to make sure that they understand um, about the community before they come to school. I'm very sure if during this pandemic we can do a lot of sharing session like this. For example, through KOMAD, maybe next year, um, MOE or JPNJ can collaborate with KOMAD to make sure the teachers from around the teachers who want to teach in indigenous school will go for this kind of sharing session so that they are prepared before they go to schools in for example in rural areas in Sabah and Sarawak, so they need to understand the
Yes.
cultural perspective of of the
Yeah.
people in Sabah and
Mm-mm.
Sarawak. So it's really important for them to know about the community first before they go and teach the
Yes.
community in the school.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. Sharing
Mm.
sessions like this, yeah, Encik Jasli,
Yes.
will really benefit and raise awareness amongst teachers going out to these schools. Yeah. Yeah, indeed. All right. I guess that's about it, Encik Jasli. Thank you,
Okay.
Encik Jasli, for
Okay.
enlightening us with the topic embedding culture in language teaching and for sharing your research, very interesting research findings. And was
Mm.
also great to hear about your achievements. All right. I'm sure we are now clear that, yeah, audience, I'm sure we are now clear that in embedding culture in language teaching and learning amongst the indigenous students, since Encik Jasli just now his focus was on these students. Teachers need to understand the 8 elements on indigenous pedagogy, amongst others, connecting topics taught to nature, connecting to the community, having more hands-on activities, using learning maps, having storytelling activities, making storytelling more interactive, as mentioned by Encik Jasli. Another important element is showing love and care. I guess when it comes to language teaching and learning, teachers, no matter where they are, we need to consider these elements in teaching to make language learning more meaningful and effective. Yeah. I hope that all of you have gained some insights on the topic and enjoyed the presentation by Encik Jasli Jamil, Encik Jasli Ramli. Thank you, Encik Jasli. Uh, Thank you, dear all, yeah, for being with us today. The KOMAD committee would like to thank the Educational Technology Division, MOE, Ministry of Education, for the platform, the studio director, Encik Azhar Ali, the producer, Dr. Suras Kanagasabai, and IPGKBA's technical support, Encik Muhammad Fitri Aziz. With that, this brings us to the end of the session for today. Our next session, stay tuned, yeah, will be on the 5th of October 2021 at 11 a.m. A presentation by Dr. Azlina Muhammad from the English Language Teaching Center, Malaysia. Do join us for this session. Thank you. Have a blessed day. Stay safe and take care. Bye.